when you see something and you want to address it, what factors are you considering in terms of where to start them from an intensity threshold standpoint?
I mean, some of this is where experience in our industry is undervalued. We've got a bunch of 28-year-old experts. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to disrespect anybody, but like, it just, think about the reps Rufus has seen. Like, Rufus can't probably, and I don't know this, but like, I'm assuming just by being around people like Lee and Bill and Rufus and these incredible professionals that have done this for, 15, 20 years, it's like, or more, like, they just have this intuition that has been developed because of experience, the number of reps. So like, there are times where I bet Rufus tries something or makes a correction where he like can only maybe partially explain it, but like, he just is like, this is just what I felt like I needed to do. And it was effective. It worked because he had seen that before. So there's a little bit of intuition that goes into this. And I know that's not a great answer because it doesn't really give people, actionable stuff, but like, it's just it's the value of experience. And so, there is a little bit of intuition that goes into it. There's also, whatever you define as the limiting factor. So like, let's say, that working on that first step acceleration and hip flexion is limited. Well, it could be limited hip flexion, but what if it could also be, was he able to push on the backside long enough to allow hip flexion to occur? So maybe it's a hip extension issue. But like, I'm looking at hip flexion. And so I can, sometimes you can address both, by working on one. So it's not so much that, one is more important than the other. It's just kind of like, respect the whole movement, and again, and how things in the movement, the chunks of it affect each other. Hip extension that be able to push off affects the timing and the motion of the hip flexion, which also affects the trunk rotation. In the last 2 years, probably the thing that's changed the most in my thinking, if I had to go back and kind of sprinkle on a little bit to the last question, is I respect timing so much more. And I view things with a timing, caveat now more so than I did before. And I've just come to appreciate it. So there is that aspect. So, but from an intensity standpoint, you just work your way back down. So like, again, like the wall run's a great example. I mean, you can use, there's a million exercises, that people make up all the time, but like, let's say the acceleration piece is, you don't get the range of motion. And I kind of have this, you guys have probably heard me say before, but like, I kind of have this position force kind of model in my head. It's like, okay, do you know this athlete has the requisite range? Does he have hip extension? Does he have hip flexion passively? Okay, so now it's, that's not a thing we need to work on, right? So does he produce enough force in the amount of time? And let's say he has the range of motion, so now I got to move on to the force thing. You might do something, you don't want to change the exercise drastically unless you absolutely know it needs to. So I might assist him, into his first two steps to allow, to kind of what's going to feel like an exaggeration of those first steps to that athlete, but maybe it's, allowing that person to give the appropriate push off that you want. So if that's not working, or maybe concurrently, so at the same time, I'm doing those wall run exercises, I'm doing, step up position exercises, I'm doing kind of Bosch step up variations to allow for that. And you just, if you don't like what you're seeing, you coach it. If coaching doesn't work, take it down a notch, and that can mean anything. It can mean do the same exercises, but supported. It can mean do the same exercise, but slow and controlled. It could mean, instead of doing like 8 switches on a wall, maybe you have to hold that position for 3 to 4 breaths or 5 breaths or whatever, and then give me a switch, so you got to kind of play with it and try to skew the intensity of that skill, to match what they show you can do. And again, that's not a definitive answer, but it's the process, that's the process, and you don't need, hey, do this, do that. You need a process.